together here in this 2016 reunion because the mighty ship Midway played such a pivotal role in our lives. Our shared experiences in fair weather and foul, on liberty or hard at work aboard ship enabled us to form friendships that have lasted a lifetime. We learned invaluable lessons about ourselves and our shipmates about integrity, courage, patriotism, honor, decency, and hard work. We took it for granted that we should work to exceed our expectations and make our command proud. We were blessed with exceptionally competent leadership who helped us believe in and contribute to Midway management. We ask your blessings on our time together here in Pensacola. We ask a special blessing on the dedicated officers of our Midway Veterans Association who work tirelessly throughout the year to bring us together in such a special time and place. May we now and always enjoy the companionship of good friends and cherished shipmates. Accept our thanks for this food and those who have prepared and served it, but even more for the privilege of feeding our spirits by the sea stories we tell, the memories not to be forgotten, and the deep gratitude we have for being shipmates on the grandest of all vessels, the USS Midway. Amen.
Amen. That we'd like to recognize, and every recognition will go on throughout the ceremony at the evening. First of all, at the head table, let me first recognize our guest for the evening, our guest speaker, Captain Ed Ellis. Next, I'd like to introduce the commanding officer of NAS Pensacola, Captain Chris Martin. And I'd like to also recognize Captain Tony McFarland. In keeping with that level of hierarchy, let me also introduce one of our dear friends, Captain Bob Ammon. And I didn't mention Patricia Laurentis. I think Bob is that's Bob's escort. As we go forward this evening, there will be additional introductions. Let me just also introduce Jim Hayter. Jim is, as everybody knows, is our vice president for the association. Dave Mason is our secretary treasurer. Joe is the boss. Turner Mann, who you just met, Turner is our chair of the membership committee. Let me also want to introduce our four plant owners that we have here tonight. Charles Geronimo, you want to stand up, please? Charles was Blake Smith. Jack Waller. And finally, we're honored here tonight with our newest World War II vet, Bill Lovejoy.
The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their motives when answering the call to duty. The single red rose displayed in the vase reminds us of the life of each of the missing, their loved ones and friends of those Americans who keep the faith, awaiting answers. The vase is tied with a red ribbon, symbol of our continued determination to account for our missing. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of the bitter fate of those captured and missing in a foreign land. A pinch of salt symbolizes the tears endured by those missing and their families who seek answers. The Bible represents the strength gained through faith to sustain those lost from our country, founded as one nation under God. The glass is inverted to symbol their inability to share this evening's toast. The chairs are empty. They are missing. Remember. Here's an important thing that I think everybody should know. Captain Martin has accumulated over 3,000 hours of flying and 400 carrier arrested landings. If you could join me at the cake. Christine, would you like to take a picture before we cut the cake? She said she's never seen him do a cake cutting ceremony. Come here.
I don't want to get in the...
No, we actually have two. We have the big one and the smaller one, so you can
Come over here so I can get away.
take either one of those. What the deal is, you're going to cut the first ceremonial piece, and the staff will come out. So you're not going to be up here.
You want to do it together?
Why don't you take a picture? You guys do it together. Come on. Here, come on. That's good. You go ahead. No. You go ahead.
I feel like I'm getting married again.
You said you never done, and now you can't say that. All right, look over here. Got it.
All right, now you cut.
Got it. I think I got two or three. Take a shot.
Right.
Take a shot. Anywhere you want to do it. Okay.
That's awesome.
Now, thank you very much.
Thank you for asking.
And by the way, I was going to say.
And the first group that I want to stand and be recognized by all of us. Now you don't have to stand, Jack, if you don't want to. Our 1945 plank owners, these are the guys that were on the commissioning crew of the Midway back in 1945. So stand and be recognized. That is a pretty special group, and I should add to that, these guys are all World War II veterans as well. Okay, the next group. Oh, okay, that's right. Bill, stand and be recognized. We have a World War II veteran here. Bill came on the Midway in September, one month, or October, 1 month after it was commissioned. So he's a plank owner too, in addition. Okay, now the next group of Midway veterans, to stand and be recognized, are the 1957 plank owners. We're not sure who they are. These are the people when the Midway was recommissioned the first time. I think that's when they went to an angle flight deck from the straight flight deck. Right? Right. Okay, and now we have the 1970 plank owners. Stand and be recognized. And at that time, I know the Midway was recommissioned again because it had a lot of work done.
May 7th, 1970.
There was a lot of work done to it to get its ballast and everything, it had all sorts of problems. Okay, now, this category is not plank owners. Since we're in the center of naval aviation, everything about this town centers around naval aviation. I would like all naval aviators stand and be recognized. Midway veterans stand and be recognized? All. Okay, thank you. That's the end of the stand and be recognized portion.
Once I get in front of a microphone, I'm hard to turn off, folks. I'm sorry. Actually, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker for this evening, Captain Ed Ellis, United States Navy retired, was the JAG officer aboard the USS Midway from 1973 to 1975. The biggest thing that I know about the Midway during that period of time was the Operation Frequent Wind activities that were going on as we were taking people out of South Vietnam and flying them out to the 4 aircraft carriers that were out there. So Ed is going to talk about that. He is currently a vice president and legal counsel for the Naval Aviation Museum Foundation.
Today and tried to come up with some events that happened in the 2 years I was on the Midway. I never had much of an appreciation for naval aviation until I got to the Midway. I came to the Midway via an inter-service transfer from the Air Force, and I was in Long Beach at the law center there, and they sent out they wanted volunteers to go to aircraft carriers, so I figured, you know, I'm kind of behind the power curve with all these other Navy lawyers, maybe I should go to a carrier and get a little bit of experience.
Could we turn up the volume just a tad?
Okay. Anyway, the first aircraft carrier they offered me was the Kitty Hawk. The Kitty Hawk was down in San Diego, and she had just had her race riots. And I said, I may be stupid, but I'm not crazy. I'm not going to the Kitty Hawk. The next aircraft carrier they offered me was the Enterprise. Well, at that time, the Enterprise was the only nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and I'd heard bad stories about not being able to get into good Liberty ports on the Enterprise, so I said, do I have a third option? And they said, well, we've got this old carrier, the Midway, that's going to be homeported in Japan. Would you like to go to Japan? And I said, well, let me check with my wife, and she said, yes, I'd like to, so that's the way I wound up on the Midway. When we first got underway on the Midway for Japan, there had been a couple of things that had happened before we got underway. The Midway had come back from a long deployment, had gone into the yards at Hunters Point for about half the valves were put in backwards. And we had a lot of trouble getting that straightened out. And then they decided that the normal turnover happened on the Midway. After a long deployment, people retired, they got transferred, they got out of the Navy. So about half of the ship's company had been replaced and went through rep tray. Well, after rep tray in San Diego, they then announced the change of home port to Japan and said it was going to be an all-volunteer crew. About half the crew decided they didn't want to go to Japan. So we wound up getting underway for Japan with half of the crew had not been through rep tray with the ship. And it was exciting. As we're leaving San Francisco, we're going under the Golden Gate Bridge, and this young sailor named Anthony Puga decided that he didn't want to leave his girlfriend behind, so he takes a running start and off flight deck, off the fantail, into the water. We had a helicopter in the air turning, and we had him back on board the ship within about 6 minutes. And I'm there to meet the helicopter as the legal officer, and the captain calls down and said, Ed, find out if he fell or he jumped. And so Puga got off the aircraft, and I said, Puga, did you jump or did you fall? He said, I jumped, sir. I called the skipper back, and he said, put him in the brig. If he had fallen, he would have gotten a shot of whiskey out of sick bay. But anyway, Puga, 3 days later, comes up to captain's mast. He gets punished and gets restriction, extra duty, and a bust. Well, one of his extra duties, the Chief Master at Arms decided the Master at Arms shack needed to be painted out. Master Chief Jim Wills was the Chief Master at Arms, and so he tells Puga, go get the paint and the brushes, and you come in here and paint the Master at Arms shack. So off goes Puga, comes in and starts painting the Master at Arms shack. He's not a very good painter. there's more paint on the deck than there is on the walls or the bulkheads or the master at arms shack. Master Chief comes in and sees it and goes ballistic. Throws him out of the office, get this mess cleaned up. This is oil-based paint. Being a bright sailor, he comes back with a wet mop. So he is wet mopping the paint off the deck. The Master Chief comes in again, whereupon he throws him out of the office. The kid takes the mop and throws it over his shoulder, puts a streak of paint down the overhead and down the front of the Chief Master office. I thought Master Chief Wills was going to have a stroke. We laughed about that for weeks. The group that we got in that issue, the Bureau scraped up everybody they could find to fill up the Midway. Back then we had a thing called Project 100,000, which was caused by the Army. The Army was getting all the Middle Group 4 enlistees who were about bright enough to chip paint. And they complained to the Secretary of Defense, McNamara at the time, who came up with Project 100,000, who decreed that the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps would take 10,000 Middle Group 4 people a year for 10 years. They called it Project $100,000. Less than 10% of those people completed their enlistment. And we got more than our fair share of those. And I remember sitting in the wardroom having lunch one day when Jim Roper, the first lieutenant of the ship, came in and sat down. And I said, "What's the matter, Jim?" He's just shaking his head. He says, "I just had 3 guys report in the deck department whose combined GCT is 65. Average is about 50. So it was a trying time. The other things that we had happen that were really, some of them were humorous, some of them were not so humorous. Our first skipper was Captain Foley, Sylvester Foley, who went on to get 4 stars. Our second skipper was Dick Schulte, Captain Dick Schulte, who retired as a captain, and of course Larry Chambers, Admiral Chambers, Captain Chambers at the time. Nobody realized it at the time, but Captain Chambers was black. He didn't look it, and we were having racial problems on the Midway at the time. We've had drug problems, we had racial problems, we had assaults. It was a zoo that first year in Japan. Well, we had a lot of militant young black sailors on board the ship. Were not happy about being in Japan, and we had one of them up at captain's mast, and he proceeded to attack the captain for being a white honky who was not going to give him a fair shake, whereupon Captain Chambers closed the mast with me, the Chief Master at Arms, and the XO there, and proceeded to rip this young man a new one, saying, "I'm black, and don't you ever accuse me of being a racist," and just really ate him alive and threw him in the brig. Well, that was out around the ship within about 30 seconds that the skipper was black. It kind of changed the racial climate on the ship to the better. But to give you an idea how bad it was, the legal office on the Midway when I was there was me, a first-class legal, a second-class yeoman, a personnelman, and a YNSN. And the first year I was on the Midway, we took 1,000 cases to captain's mast, 200 administrative discharges, and close to 100 court-martials. That was in our first year. Along towards the end of our first year, we had, close to the end of the first year, we had a walk-off, basically a mutiny on the ship. We found out that a group of about 100 sailors that were not happy about being homeboarded in Japan, did not want to be on the Midway or in Japan, were going to walk off the ship and protest when we got underway. We found out about it about 3 days ahead of time from some snitches that we had on board. And so we put people on the quarterdeck with a logbook, and everybody that left the ship the morning we got underway had to sign a logbook, and they were informed that missing the movement of the ship by design was going to be punished under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We had naval criminal investigative people in the gantries around the ship videotaping everybody that left the ship. And they were handed a sheet of paper that told them when the ship was getting underway and what the penalties were for not making the movement of the ship. About 65 sailors walked off to stand on the pier and watch the ship get underway. I could not have handpicked the people I wanted to get rid of more. Needless to say, they were rounded up, and we processed all the charge sheets on them and court-martialed every one of them. They all got a minimum of 60 days in the brig of bad conduct discharge, busted E1 and forfeitures, 2/3 pay per month for anywhere 2 to 6 months. That pretty much cleaned up the last of that sort of problems on the ship. But we still had drug problems. Back then, we didn't have a good drug testing program, so the guys that were in the middle of the drug fight were the Chief Master at Arms, the NCIS agent, myself, and the XO. And we had an LSD problem on the ship, and so we had a kid named Fitzgerald, who we had busted on drugs, but he was kind of in with the drug community, and I brought Fitzgerald in because we had a bad conduct discharge hanging over his head. I said, Fitzgerald, if you help us bust up this drug ring, I'll make that BCD go away. He said, can you do that? I said, the captain can. And he said, all right, I'll do it. So we set up a control buy. The NCIS agent had $50 available to control buy. So the Chief Master at Arms, myself, and the XO each put up $100 for this control buy, and boy, was it a control buy, because we wanted our money back. But we busted 5 radio. What a bunch of dopeheads was radio. Well, it turns out Admiral Coogan was our embarked flag at the time, and he was not the easiest person in the world to get along with. The CEO of the ship didn't get along with him. I was additional duty to his staff involuntarily. And so these 5 radiomen were all on Admiral Coogan's staff. So we went up to brief Admiral Coogan on what had happened. And Admiral Coogan said, why wasn't I informed? Well, I didn't have enough sense to keep my mouth shut. I said, because we couldn't trust you. And whereupon he kind of came unglued with me, and finally when he settled down, I said, it's not your integrity, Admiral, that we were questioning. It's this reaction that you would have had if we'd have come to you. You would have immediately kicked them off your staff, and we wouldn't have been able to prosecute them. That didn't calm him down a bit, and I don't think he ever said a kind word to me after that. But we had some rocky starts in the Midway. Our first at-sea period, we had an A6 and A7 mid-air collision about 12 miles behind the ship. We lost both aircraft and the air crew. We lost the helo that we launched to recover. We lost 3 of the crewmen in the helo. It was a terrible start in Japan. A lot of it was attributable to the inexperience of the crew. But within all of that, you had a sense of humor. One of the funnier things that happened, we were down in the Philippine op area, and we were doing a nuclear weapons loading exercise up on the flight deck. And those of you here who have participated in those, as you know, the Marines form a security perimeter around the aircraft that is getting the shape attached to it. So we had the Marines out. It was up on the flight deck. We were arming an A6. Well, the pilot gave the throttle little kick and blew the Marine over the side. He had on his cranial, his flight deck gear, his M14, and he hit the water 40-something feet below, and was floundering around in the water with his rifle. He doesn't inflate his flight deck gear. We had a helo in the air. We had to put a swimmer in the water to put him in, knock the weapon out of his hands, put him in a collar, hoist him to the helo. He ingested so much water, we had to medevac him to the Philippines. He was in the hospital there for about a month being treated for pneumonia. We finally get him back to the ship, and I'm having to do this little investigation because of the injury associated with it. And I said, Private, why didn't you let go of your rifle and inflate your flight deck gear? He said, sir, the guy told me he'd kill me if I ever lost my rifle. The other thing I learned more on the Midway in my 2 years on the Midway than I probably have since. I've worked for an awful lot of admirals over the years. Some of the best I worked with were on the Midway, and one of the worst I ever worked with was on the Midway. But the Midway really was a magical ship. It was, in 2 years on the Midway, I had 9 days I worked physically on the ship. We would get home. I'd go home for what I hoped was the weekend. And there was this group ashore in Japan they called the White Hat or the Hard Hat Shore Patrol. And there was a love-hate relationship between the Midway crew and the Hard Hat Shore Patrol. They loved to hate the Shore Patrol. And it seemed like every time I would get ashore and think I was going to have some time with my family, there would be a brawl in the honcho, and I would have to respond to get sailors out of the brig. And wherever we went, that was one of my main functions, was to try and get our sailors back ashore. And I learned that bribery works very well in the Philippines, that we never left a sailor ashore on legal hold in the Philippines, which is pretty remarkable. But it was, you learned a lot on the Midway that kept with me for the rest of my career. I learned that you don't BS the boss. If you do, you're going to be in a world of trouble. I saw some XOs and COs that were absolute leaders that you would have followed anywhere, and you learn from those people. I was a fresh caught lieutenant commander when I went aboard, and I learned more about leadership and good sailors in the fleet in those 2 years than I have since. I look back on my time on the Midway as two of the most challenging, the most adventuresome, the most tiring, and the most exciting time of my life. So for all of you that served on the Midway, you probably had the same type of experience as I did. You'll never forget it. That's the reason you're here. And I applaud. This is probably one of the largest reunion groups from a ship that I've seen come through Pensacola. So thank you very much for coming. Hope you enjoyed the museum, and I'm sure enjoyed talking to you.
We have put the name of every Midway veteran in this bowl. So, sorry, ladies, you're not in the hunt here, but we are now going to draw 2 names out for these flags, and you get, and these are a gift from the Midway Veterans Association. For once, I'm not making you pay for something. Peter B. Craig. Here, why don't you guys get over there and do that? You in the middle?
Angle that down. That's just like that. Perfect. All right, gentlemen, just looking right here. Hold that. Let me get one more, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, we do have another one. Captain Martin, if you'd pull another one out. Tommy Shelton. That's all. That's all. Wait a minute. We got one more picture. I'm sorry, I was wrong. We're gonna get your picture snapped.
All right, just keep it looking right here. Here we go. On the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. And let me get one more, please. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Congratulations to our lucky winners, and take those home and show them all the pride.
The World War II Victory Medal was not available to the veterans of World War II until after the official end of the war. which I don't know if you know, when Harry Truman finally signed the documents at the end of 1946 that ended the war. By that time, most of the soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and so on, that had served during the war were already gone, back into school, back into their jobs, back into their homes. Captain Martin, if you would please do the presentation of the World War II Victory Medal to Bill Lovejoy.
I'll tell you, in keeping, I'm sure you can hear me, in keeping with Navy tradition, if you can, attention to award. Sir, this is, first of all, you don't know how special this is for me to be able to do this for you. My dad was a World War II veteran, joined the Navy in 1939, and he retired in 1958. And for the majority of my life, I've looked at this medal. It wasn't until after his passing that I really understood what this meant. So one of the great pleasures I get as a commanding officer is to present awards, tell people they're promoted, and that sort of thing. But this night, this occasion, to be able to give this to you, present you this, so many years later, is probably one of the most special things I've done in my 32 years in the Navy. Thank you so much for your service. As Tom Brokaw said, you were part of America's greatest generation. I thank you for your service, sir. Thank you.
I don't deserve this, but I have insomnia and I don't deserve that either.
I salute you.